What do I really think about the release and the making public of Prince Harry's immigration documents? So welcome back to the channel. This is Black Belt Secrets. Make sure you subscribe here, and if you're not familiar with my other channel, I'm the Black Belt Barrister. You can go ahead and subscribe there too. On this channel, I'll give you some more of my personal thoughts. On my other channel, it's more of a neutral, this is the law, this is a legal analysis type channel. So here, you're here for my personal thoughts. What do I really think? Well, to go through and analyze and come to a reasoned decision on what I really think about releasing these documents, we have to go through a few different issues first. And really we're balancing the right to privacy as against the public interest in how the Department of Homeland Security has dealt with his application in whatever form that took, because we still don't know, because they might have a whole series of different routes and applications and visas that he may have gone through. We don't know what kind of visa he's on. All we know is that he's entitled, or should be entitled ordinarily, to residence because he's married to Meghan. But that doesn't mean he doesn't go through the immigration process. So that in itself is the first hurdle. What was the application procedure? And we don't really know. And because we don't really know, we can't really analyze that in as full a detail as we might otherwise like to. But looking at the privacy aspect, the right to privacy, this again is balanced against being a public figure. I.e., if you're a public figure, you've got less of a right to privacy than you would if you're just an ordinary non-public figure citizen and you want to keep your affairs private. And that's not to say all of your affairs should be public if you're a public figure, but to some degree you come under more scrutiny. And indeed there is case law, fairly heavy loaded case law, in which it was decided fairly conclusively that people who hold public office are going to be put under much more scrutiny and question than those just living in private life. Therefore, we move on to think about Prince Harry moved away from public royal duties to move to the United States, to step back from his official work, but then still wants to remain known as Prince Harry, His Royal Highness the Duke of Sussex. So if they maintain those titles, they are still public figures, is where my analysis goes. They are still public figures. They are still open to scrutiny. There is still this higher level of disclosure required of people in a public position than those in a private position. Much like you want to be a barrister, a solicitor, an educator, or even more so probably for politicians, there are certain things you have to disclose. So for example, lawyers, teachers, etc., if you had convictions of any kind, anything above really a speeding or a parking ticket, you need to disclose all of those. If you get anything even slightly more than that, you need to disclose them. We have to self-report to the regulator so they can then make a decision as to whether or not to take disciplinary action against us. And many barristers do that. Many barristers have come across something that they've had to self-report, and then they get investigated. And it's always better, obviously. It's always better if you come across something that you feel that they should look at, that you report it. So coming back to this point here, if there were lots of things, which there are in Harry's private life, which might be of interest to the public in general, the public at large, in respect of a decision which should ordinarily and should properly be made impartially and without favour, without bias, and in accordance with the law, such as immigration. I know for certain, for example, that many people have come through the immigration process and it's been extremely difficult. It's time-consuming, it's expensive, the applications are expensive, you have to provide stacks of documents, in some cases even records of phone calls to show when and how your relationship started and then developed and then you went on to be married. Else they don't believe that you married properly. So taking all of that together, if they maintain the titles and they still want to be known, and they still, at least to some degree, bank and market themselves on those titles, then whichever way you look at it, Prince Harry is in a public position. Whether he stepped back from full royal duties or not, he's still within a public position. Does it then follow that he loses all right to privacy to that information? Not necessarily. But does that override the public interest in the decisions made by the Department for Homeland Security? That is a trickier question. And it's tricky for a number of reasons, not least of which because in and of itself it is a fair question as to whether or not his application was treated without bias and fairly, so that somebody doesn't just get a green light because of who they are, because they are a famous person. Most people, of course, would not appreciate that. Most people would not support that. Again, if I did a poll, I think I'd be above 80% or even above 90% that anyone in that sort of position should not be given favour just because of who they are. Most people, I presume, would favour an equal treatment for immigration applications, regardless of who you are. But aside from that as a reason, the reason that this information has been sought in the first place is because of his own admissions. So there's an inherent irony and a contradiction, and arguably a flawed logic in the refusal to rest upon the right to privacy in the same information that has been disclosed in interviews and in books. Now, I'm not speaking specifically about the admissions that were made, whether they were right or wrong. That's really for you to decide. That's not the opinion that I'm giving you in this video. This video really is my view on whether his right to privacy should outweigh the public interest. My ultimate conclusion, based on all of those things put together, the fact that it is definitely in the public interest, because people want to know that these decisions are taken properly and without bias, and because he is still, and they are still, people in a public position because of titles, and thirdly, because of the inherent contradiction in his own admissions in respect of the same information that is sought that would or should be on those applications, I cannot conclude that his privacy in that information, specifically in those documents relating to the things that he's already talked about, I just cannot conclude that his privacy overrides the public interest. And that's just an opinion. And I think a lot of people will agree with that, and a lot of people may disagree with that, and that's absolutely fine. That's just my personal opinion. That's not, just to be clear, this is not necessarily a legal opinion. On this channel, it's my own view. As a lawyer, I have a unique way of thinking about things. Every lawyer's way of thinking about things is somewhat unique because of their experiences. I've got a lot of experience that a lot of my fellow lawyers don't have. I have started and run my own businesses for something in the region of 20 odd years, which many barristers can't say. Even if they are self-employed, that's not the same, with respect to any barrister watching, that's not the same as running your own business. Running your own business and employing people and sourcing products and materials and offices and marketing and selling and customer service and etc. etc. There are a long list of things to do with running a business and growing a business for that long. Successfully turning over millions of pounds, my businesses have over the years. I have this unique insight that many other lawyers don't have. And having dealt with these issues and balancing these arguments, both from a business perspective and now as a legal perspective, that gives me a personal perspective and input on these things. And so I come down on the side that the general public would want to know that these decisions were made without bias and were made fairly. Whether that extends to full disclosure and publication of those documents is a very slightly different question. And allow me to explain. So what I think is there is an avenue, an alternative perhaps, to have something akin to special counsel. Special counsel is where, let's say you have a court case and there is certain information that neither side is allowed to see for whatever reason. Special counsel will come in and look at that material and say, I've seen the material, this side is right or this side is wrong, having looked at the material, but without disclosing what the material is, just to say, I've looked at it, this is not a valid argument. That's what special counsel really is there to do. It might be slightly different in the United States, but certainly from an England and Wales perspective, special counsel can be brought in for that specific purpose. So there may be a direct equivalent in the United States. There may be an alternative for somebody to take the special role to look at the documents, the application, all the documents that were listed, because there's quite a significant list of documents in that request. So it would have surprised me if the department just said, here you go, here's everything. I didn't expect that for a second. I did perhaps expect something, which is usually the way. It's usually, we want all of these things, and the response is, you're not having them all. You can have 2 and 6, and even part of 6, because we're keeping part of 6, something like that. And give them part of that information, and then it might satisfy enough of the curiosity. Or if you had special counsel look at everything and come back and say, yep, or we've looked at this information, we've considered it, we come to the view that the application was done properly, it was considered properly, nothing untoward was going on, there was nothing biased, there were no automatic green lights or anything like that. It was all done properly, perhaps, or the very reverse, and come back and say, yes, you are right to suspect something's going on here. This wasn't done, that wasn't done properly. Now we need to go back and they need to do it again, or something like that. But without breaching or having any argument of the breach of privacy in respect of those documents. Now in Europe, there's a significant argument around privacy and a significant body of law. And even having coming out of the EU, the UK has the retained GDPR, which made it very difficult for businesses. One business, I think it was Weatherspoons, deleted their entire customer database of some 300,000 or whatever it was customers. I'll correct myself if I find correct figures if I'm wrong, but it was a large database of customers. They said, we don't want to deal with this. We don't want to risk being wrong. We're just going to delete everything. So many businesses did that. Many businesses did just delete everything. And many businesses got into trouble. And in some respects, GDPR has helped to fine companies that have been in breach of data protection and so on. So in some sense, those laws and those rules serve a purpose. And it gives you the right to remove and delete information if you believe that they weren't gathering it lawfully, they didn't have permission, or they're selling it and they shouldn't be selling it, all those kind of things. So we do take privacy laws very seriously. And in the States, I know you do too. So does it surprise me that the department has come back with that decision? No, of course not. I expected that decision, and I suppose I expected it on the same basis that they've provided, which is that's private, you're not having it. But now it will go to a judge to decide, should they release those documents? What do I think about that? I think the judge will go through broadly the same reasoning that I have just now. They are in public office in some sense or another, even if they've stepped back from royal duties. They still hold the titles. They still create a public interest in how those decisions were reached, what information was disclosed and what information was considered, how the application was processed, and so on. And it wouldn't surprise me if the court comes to some kind of view like that, such as we need a proper assessment of this application. And we need someone to look at it. How has this application been dealt with, if at all, unless there is some other route that we don't know about. So those are my thoughts. That's what I really think. It's just a personal explorative opinion. It's not a fully vamped legal opinion. That would take quite significant effort of going through case law and everything else, which I haven't done specific to this case. I do to specific other cases. I've dealt with clients before now where I have, in my opinion, my legal opinion, I've found a bank to be in breach of data protection and liable to fairly significant damages, and pass that back to my instructing solicitors, who've then put that to the bank, and I believe they settled. And I say that because they didn't come back to me with anything else, and they would normally do so to progress the case if they were going to claim. And so I've advised in a number of these cases before, and it takes a great deal of analysis, legal analysis, and it takes time and dozens of pages to properly come to that fully reasoned legal opinion. So that's why I always tell you that my videos cannot be legal advice. They are far too simplistic, even though they do go into detail sometimes, and they can take a lot of research to condense it into just a few short minutes, but that's why they cannot be relied upon as legal advice. There's far too much involved if it were legal advice. Those of you that watch my channel that have come to me for legal advice, thank you first of all, but those of you that still watch and have come to me will know firsthand how much we cover in just 1 hour or maybe 2 hours of conference, and why it is that the videos are so condensed compared to formal legal advice. So I hope that's been interesting to you. Please do hit the like button and subscribe if you found that interesting. I really appreciate that. It encourages me to keep producing these videos for you. If you're interested in my personal thoughts on any of these cases, do let me know. I'll continue to make them if you'll continue to watch them. So make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you next time.